Hello and welcome to Book Lovers Companion. My name is Edith and right next to me is my lovely co-host, the Chattering Teacup.
Hello.
And here with us, independent author and poet, Laura DiNovis Berry. Hello, Laura, and welcome at Book Lovers Companion.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And we said before we started the recording, we have to admonish you for not telling us about your poems about rugby and women.
I'm very sorry I didn't tell you. My deepest apologies.
That's fine. It was interesting to find out because we also enjoy watching rugby a lot. And
great.
You have to tell us, of course, before we dive into your other books, in your fantasy books, about this collection of poetry about rugby and women. When? How? What? Tell us.
So I started off writing poetry seriously. I went to school for writing. Poetry was what I really dove into. And after years of playing rugby, I wanted to write poems about it. I thought it would be a fun exercise. I was trying to play with different forms. I was studying different forms at the time on my own. And then we got egg-shaped ball, which I thought it's sort of a love letter to the sport and to the women who play it. And it's also, I think it's important to show that even when you are in a realm where you are supporting other women and you are trying to build other women up, you're still playing a competitive, violent sport. And sometimes you do just want to hit each other. So I think that's, I wanted to get in a little bit of the weeds of feminism in it as well. We're like, yeah, you do love each other in a sense, even if you don't know these women, but you also, sometimes you kind of hate each other too, because you want that spot on the field. And I think getting the full picture of, it's not always a loving sisterhood all the time. You have women in themselves aren't angels. They have this amazing kaleidoscope of personalities and pictures and violence and compassion in them both. And I wanted to put that into egg-shaped ball. So that's what we got. It's a tiny little thing, but I'm hoping maybe someday there will be a second part to it. So we'll have to see where we go.
You just mentioned you played rugby yourself. How did that happen? I mean, you are in the United States. I mean, it's rather unusual,
Not
isn't
very
it?
common. Yeah.
It's starting to get bigger. It's starting to get more popular. I started playing in college. Oddly enough, my high school team they existed. No one really knew what it was, but they were there. And I was always too scared to try it. And then I got to college, and one of the girls on the team at recruitment day, they had all the tables out, all the clubs, all the fraternities and sororities. This girl saw me sort of look at it, and she whipped a postcard at me and said, "You want to play rugby?" I went, "Okay." So that's how I started playing. I've been playing since, I believe, 2012. So it's been quite a long time. I'm always learning. I still don't know all the rules.
Nobody does.
But I for the most of my rugby career, played as a lock. And I've started to shift out to flanker, which has been nice. I don't have my face squished all the time, which is great. But I do, being a part of the pack is my favorite place to be. I love being a forward.
Yeah. And do you also watch rugby on a regular basis?
I try to. That's where it gets a little harder over here. Thankfully, I'm in an area where it's easy to go watch people play live. But watching the professionals play, you kind of have to do some digging online to find... Yeah. Thankfully, we have a lot of people, my teammates, who love to watch it. So they'll always share links of where you can watch it. But so unfortunately, I don't watch as much as I want to, but I try. If I can find the source, I try.
Okay. And do you have a favorite team or a favorite national team even? Because, I mean, we do have a rugby national team in Austria as well. But
it's very low.
Yeah, it's very low. But we're all...
Internationally.
I have to admit my all-time favorites are the All Blacks, so guilty as charged.
I don't think anyone's going to fault you for that. I guess I have to say my favorite team is my team, the Phoenixville White Horse team. But if I'm watching professional, I'm going to root for USA. Got to root for the home. But it is, you can't not love the All Blacks. But but it's been fascinating. Over the pandemic, I tried to start my own rugby team when I was living in a different state, and I was trying to learn more about professional professional rugby. So I was starting to listen to British podcasts.
Ah.
And that was fun. Learning about like the women professional and club teams over there was so much fun. So like I had a little bit of a soft spot for the British teams, but like I said, you gotta keep it home.
But you said just you listen to podcasts about rugby. Do you also listen to Mike Tyndall's podcast?
I don't think I found that one.
Yeah, you should look it up because he's married to Sarah, the daughter of the Princess Royal. Princess Anne,
okay.
and he was a professional rugby player.
Wow. Okay, I will have to add that to my list.
Yeah, see
Awesome.
something to look up. I mean,
So did you two ever play rugby, or did you just find it and loved it?
It just found it. I loved it. I mean, she found it first. Teacup found it first. Then I came to it as well. And I have to admit, since the 2015 World Cup, we are absolute fans, and we did watch other teams. But it's a bit tricky here as well to get to watch it.
Well, the first game I saw was more than 20 years ago when I was in Australia. So it was an Australian rugby league games with different rules.
That would be so much fun.
It was fun, but I didn't understand all of it. But when we found out that you had the possibility to watch it somewhere over here, we started doing that.
That's awesome.
But
the Austrian national team is not that.
I think there are only 2 teams anyway in Austria.
Yeah.
So
That's the other thing. I know it's kind of, when you're starting to learn about rugby and you want to learn about all the leagues, there's already so many different leagues and classes and divisions, and you can get lost just trying to figure out who's playing who and who belongs in what league. Yep. So that's another, here it's pretty simple. There's not a lot going on, but when I was trying to dive into the professional realm overseas, I was like, oh my God, whose league am I supposed to be paying attention to right now?
Yeah, it's hard to decide, isn't it? I mean,
and it's also hard to watch everything because you can't do that. And in one way, we want to watch Southern Hemisphere with Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa. But you also want to watch the British League, and maybe the French is not so bad too. But you can't do that.
No,
you could sit in front of the TV all the time, all the day.
Yep. So, unfortunately, not. It's the same with books, isn't it? I mean, I would read all the time if I hadn't do a day job. Yeah. No. Well, let's not mention that. So anyway, but how did you go from writing poems about the egg-shaped ball to writing fantasy for children? Tell us about that.
I would love to. I actually have this book, Death at Dustbar College, was a birthday gift for one of my nephews. And I didn't know what to get him. So I decided I was going to write him a book. And this is actually the first prose book that I've ever written or have really finished. I mean, I had manuscripts when I was a kid, lying around. But this was the first thing that from start to finish actually got done. And you may have noticed the ending's a bit rushed because we were getting closer and closer to his birthday. And I went, oh no, I have to finish this now. So I really enjoyed writing this book. It was really fun. And I had such a good time writing it and reading chapter by chapter to the kids. I actually have 9 nieces and nephews now. I have several sisters, so a bunch of them all have children. So I've promised each one a book. So the second one is for Cristiano's little brother. And then there's a third one that I'm currently working on, which is for one of their cousins. So we're going to have a lot more coming.
So Cristiano is your nephew?
Yes.
Okay. So he was 11 for his 11th birthday. This book.
Yes. He turned 11, and I decided, he loves Harry Potter. So I was like, in the spirit of that, you're going to get something magical on your 11th birthday as well, which is this book, which I really hoped you liked.
It's something special.
It absolutely really is. And I think it's very charming to read. Yep. The characters are charming. I mean, there's no one who's malicious or anything. I mean, it's not, you don't get the feeling of the book being dangerous or what's going on being dangerous. It's fun.
Yeah, for him, I wanted to do something. My nephew he's very intelligent. He soaks things up like a sponge. So I wanted to write something that was for him. And he loves riddles. He loves solving little brain teasers. And unfortunately, I'm very bad at writing riddles. So I tried to make one that I knew he was going to figure out in 5 seconds. But I was like, honey, your aunt's only got so much going on upstairs. This is what we got to do. So, I wanted him to have a book that it reflected how he can use critical thinking to just take the evidence around him and solve a puzzle. I didn't need all of the books to like have a lesson, but with him, I definitely wanted to show that he has this big brain and he should use it. And sometimes you'll have grownups who are telling you something different, that not in a malicious way, not in a mean way, but you still have to use the evidence in front of you to come to a decision and actually use critical thinking skills. Because I think that's something that, at least over here in the US, a lot of adults aren't using their critical thinking skills very well. So I'm not really worried about the younger generation. They're pretty good at it, but just as a little reminder, like use what you got.
Yep. And keep using it.
Mm-hmm. And keep using it. Yep. Exactly.
Definitely. And would it be fair to say that it was also a lot of world building involved in this story? Because you call it a story of Antyfas. I hope I pronounce it correctly. So it's a new world, so to speak, a world made up of magic completely, I suppose.
Yeah, this was the first time that I've done that too. So this was an experiment for me. So, you pronounced it pretty well, actually. I, being ridiculous, pronounced it as Antyfas. There's a lot of anagrams in this. So Antyfas is fantasy. So that's been a lot of, there's a little, you'll notice throughout the books, there's some little like teasers like that in there. And that was also just fun. I like anagrams. And I also realized that once I started doing that, I could create this whole new language that sounded good coming out of it. It sounded like it actually didn't. Sometimes in my brain, when I read a fantasy book and they're trying to make up their own language, sometimes I think it sounds ridiculous. And this is probably me being biased, but I thought it sounded pretty good when I did it. So that also, the way it sounded, I liked it. And I also like the fact that it was an anagram and that there's several, tossed all throughout the book. So if kids do start to realize it, it's just something fun and something a little bit extra. But the world building was exciting. I had a really good time with that. It was just fun. It was silly. I'm trying to write something like Terry Pratchett-esque, where it's intelligent but smart. And I know I'm very far from Terry Pratchett, but we're working on it. So it was a good time.
And as Cristiano is your real nephew and appears in the story, is his aunt in the story you?
Yes. So there's a lot of, all of the grown-ups are very caricatured versions of themselves. I try to keep the kids, when they're in it, as true to the kids as possible. But, like a kid, when you're looking at grown-ups, basically they're always caricatures of themselves. Like when you're little, your parents seem so much larger than life. Everyone's bigger than you. So we have been immortalized as weirdos. So yes, I am, Aunt Lauya is based on me. They definitely know me as like the silly aunt. So that's why I'm the head of the party department. And then in the more of the aunts and uncles show up in the second book, actually. So that was fun too. Getting to poke fun at my sisters was pretty fun. So I definitely had a good time writing those sections in the second book.
Do you still get invited to family gatherings then?
They've enjoyed it. It keeps their kids under control when we're at family events. I'll gather the brood and we'll read a chapter or two. So it's a small price to pay.
Yeah, true. That's true indeed. And I was wondering, you said you have to write more books and for your other nephews and nieces. And so we always think it's good to recommend books to our listeners. So what would you say? Who can, who shall, who should buy this book? Because we all know when you are an aunt, an uncle, a grandfather, grandmother, you always look for books to give at Christmas and everything else. So which age bracket would you say belong your book in?
So I would say that it's broad. I tried to make it silly enough that a little brother or a little sister could enjoy listening to it, and intelligent enough that the grown-up reading it could have a fun time too. So I usually say they're from about 6 to 12. It's definitely going to be a little bit of a bigger book for a 6-year-old, but if you've got someone who's about to turn 7 or 8, then it's probably the sweet spot. But from 6 to 12, realistically, the next book is actually a little bit more scarier, even though I wrote that for a 5-year-old, because he always goes, make it scary, Yaya, make it scary. So I wrote to please. So that one has a little bit more action and danger in it. But yes, I think it's a great family read. So like I said, 6 to 12 is probably the sweet spot. I have a nephew and a niece who are both teenagers now, and the other ones are coming up on it. So it might age up as the series goes, but I'm going to try and keep it for the middle grades. And that's probably the best age range for that is 6 to 12, realistically.
And would you say that sometimes books tend to underestimate the readership, even the children, or especially the children, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, when I was growing up, I loved reading. I loved reading all the time and trying to get my hands on things that were probably beyond my age bracket, because I did sometimes think that it's hard to be a reader when you're 11 or 12 because you're still a kid, but you want something that's a little bit more challenging. So I don't think that children's books always speak down to kids. I think there's a lot of great writers out there. I just know that I didn't want to be one that spoke down to children. So that's why I tried very, very hard to make sure that I really listened to the way that my nephew and nieces spoke so I could get them translated well on the page, because I knew that if I got someone wrong, or if I wrote something in a way that they would be insulted at, that I would never hear the end of it. So I think actually getting more like the motivations of why kids do things down on page is really important. I used to teach an after-school drama class, and one of the biggest things that would help me keep kids in line was understanding that if like Jenny hit Susie, why she did it. Because if I put words in her mouth and said, oh, you hit her because she has your ball, whereas maybe Susie said something mean to her earlier, she, the other kids going to get very upset, be like, no, that's not why I did this thing. So being able to actually understand children's motivations and get that down on paper and say, I know that you're not just this little feral ball of energy, which sometimes they are, but I understand where you're coming from. I think that can be, I remember being a kid and I would get very upset when people didn't understand what I was trying to say. So I think that this book actually attempts to gap that bridge between adult and child and like say, hey, I understand what you're trying to do and where you're coming from, or like why you're upset, instead of just saying you're upset, stop crying. So I think that's why maybe some of the kids like this book, is because they're like, oh yeah, I do talk like this. I do think like that. This makes sense to me. It's not just you're over here now doing something. You're over here. So, I mean, that's a little bit of a convoluted answer. But,
I do understand. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think it is more challenging when you write the books more or less for your family or for an unknown audience?
That's actually interesting, because when I was writing the poetry book, as your previous guest said, I know he said that it was easier to write a book that you didn't think anyone else was going to read. That's how I went into Egg-Shaped Ball. I wasn't really thinking anyone else was going to read it. It's a poetry book about rugby. How many people are going to get this book? Hey!
Yes. We I think would get it. Maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Well, fabulous. So that was, initially, I actually have had more people read it than I thought I was going to, which is exciting. But the children's book is tough. I think it is tough because I am writing it for a specific child, while also hoping to have some commercial success with it. Yep. So that one, this has been harder. This has been a lot harder. The poetry is hard in the sense of I'm trying to write it in forms and make sure I'm fitting, technically harder, but emotionally and morally, with the children's book, it's so much fun to write them and I love doing it. But you're just like, oh my God, are the kids going to hate this or are they going to like it?
Would you say that you might use your nieces and nephews as beta readers in the future?
I do now, actually. So when I'm working on drafts, I would go home and I would read them a chapter or two, whatever I had finished. And I would ask them questions. Do you like this? Or, is it good? I showed little Alessio, he stars in the second book. I showed him the cover, actually, when I was designing the cover for Death at Dust Bar. And he was probably maybe 4 at the time. He comes over and he looks at it and he goes, I don't like it, and walks away. Okay. Cool. And then I showed it to the rest of the kids and they were like, it's fine, it's good. And I was like, okay, well, at least I know Alessio won't lie to me. So so they're very good to have. I definitely think children make excellent book critics.
I can imagine that. And I also wanted to ask you about the illustrations in your book. They were not done by you, were they?
No, they were done by my friend and very talented artist, Lee Thompson. He actually founded his own, it's called the Barnhouse Collective. They do animations. They do all kinds of incredible stuff. Lee was great. I loved working with him on this. He captured my images and like the tone I wanted so well. But it was also incredible because we would have Zoom meetings like this and he would start drawing things for me, and watching them come to life in real time was incredible. Lee Thompson's an amazing illustrator. I loved working with him on this.
So you could watch him. So did he share his screen then?
Yeah, he would share his screen with me and we would start talking colors, and he would start breaking it down. I would see his sketch and then he'd be like, oh, I have an idea. So Lee also brought his own vision to this too, because I would give him a very basic description or as much detail as I could, but he would then come back with something where I couldn't have pictured it the way he saw it in my head. So the collaboration where he's literally done what I wanted him to do, but with his own spin on it, was such a fun experience. And getting to work with another artist, it was just great. It was a great time. He had a lot of fun with it. I had fun with it. He did the illustrations in the second book as well. So we're hoping to keep the partnership going, which will be really fun. But he excellent illustrator. It was so much fun to watch his brain come to life and take something and make it new, which is also just the fun thing about collaborations. You never know what you're going to get.
Yeah. And is there also, might there be the idea of doing a picture book for younger children as well? I mean, they are fabulous, those pictures. And I can imagine he has also ideas about what the characters might look like.
Yeah, he had, do you mean the characters like the people characters?
Yep. For example, also the ogre and everything else.
Yeah. So that was a deliberate choice on me not to draw any of the characters, because I remembered as a kid being really annoyed if I saw a drawing of a character that I had a picture of in my head and it didn't look like the person. Yeah. So I wanted to do characters where every kid could imagine, like the Grand Magician. I wanted kids to be able to, if they think of their grandpa, to imagine their grandpa, or some other kindly gentleman they know, to fill that face in there. So it can fit for every other kid. Yeah. Which it won't obviously not for everyone, but I remembered that and I made a very deliberate choice. Like, I'm not going to annoy some poor little reader who's like, that is not what that person looks like, and you got it wrong. So anyone who has like a person probably isn't going to be depicted, but I wanted to use the illustrations to bring you into the world, which is why there's, the quill and the frog, and, volleyball was a big hit with the little kids. They liked him. I think having a bit of a stuffy sort of villain character is always fun in those books. So the kids definitely enjoyed him. He shows up in the second one as well.
Ah, good. Because he's cheeky.
I know, he's fun. I really enjoyed him. I don't know how he got his name. I think that was a moment of desperation. I don't know that. Probably too many cups of coffee and just like a jittery hand writing down notes.
I thought about Bollywood films, but
a little bit, yeah.
But there's actually, I probably should have told you about this too. I wrote a free prequel to these books. Because the youngest niece just turned a year old. So she has a short little novella that's actually, if you look up at my publisher's website, that's for free. You can listen to the audiobook or read it there. She actually has the scariest one of all, but the way that she saves the day in that, I have had confirmation from her mother, is perfectly plausible. So if you want to check that one out, it is pretty funny, but it is spooky. I think I wrote it probably like last fall, realistically. So that was what inspired that. But that's a fun one too. So if people want to learn a little bit more, like how there are some books that are going to be lighter, there's some that are a little bit scary, because those are fun too. And I remember I liked being spooked when I was little, and like maybe like having some kind of thrill or danger in the books. So this one, so that one's called wow, it would be great if I could remember it.
The Aria of Death, the prequel.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah.
Aria is her name. So Aria, thank you for remembering the title of my book.
I've written it down here, so I came prepared.
That was also what I used to practice recording the audiobooks, because I did that myself, which was I had a great time doing that. I actually have to get to work on the second one, but we'll get there.
But like I said before, I mean, doing a picture book out of your books, is that an option? Have you thought about it with your friend and illustrator?
Really young
ones. I mean, for the really, really young ones.
Yeah, maybe we haven't gotten that far yet. That actually might be. I know that Lee had a good time doing this because he does a lot of freelance work. So this was the first like illustrations that he's got to do in a while. That's a good idea. I hadn't even thought about it, to be honest. Probably should at some point. I could see fun little vignettes. Actually, of like Antyfas occurrences going on. That actually be a really good idea. You might have inspired something. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And which also brings me to another question. I mean, how do we get children to read? What would you say? What is the most important ingredient, or what does it take? What does it need to make children read a book?
Or is it enough to read to them when they're younger?
That's how I started reading. I started reading because a grown-up read to me when I was little. So my parents would read books to me all the time. My mom in the car, I always wanted to hear stories. So she had memorized The Lord of the Rings and would tell it to me on car rides because I wanted to hear stories all the time. And then I also think that I had little books on tape. So I was reading books, listening to books. So that's another reason why I did the audiobook. I know that in today's world, at least for American kids, things are very busy. You have to get stuff done. But having someone tell you a story is the oldest form of entertainment. So why not go back to your roots, you know? So having an audiobook, I don't think that that's really any kind of detriment, because also you memorize the story. You're still retaining it. So, but I think you're right. I do think just reading to children at a young age is how you do it. You lead by example, right? So reading to a kid at a young age is probably what's going to influence them to read or listen to books or decide to pick up a book on the whim when they get older. I really think it is just leading by example. And also making sure the book's entertaining.
And maybe reading yourself, because if the children see you reading, they might pick it up themselves later on.
And I remember being a kid and waking up. My mom would have already been up early to get us to school, and she'd be sitting there with her coffee reading an Agatha Christie, and then I would want to see what she was reading. So yeah, I think being a reading adult helps foster reading children, and also making reading fun. I mean, my mom would, when we were little, she would read us Winnie the Pooh stories, and then there was this game they played called Pooh Sticks, where they would drop sticks into the water. Yep. So when we went to the park, we would go play Pooh Sticks. So we would, it was, you can do different things to the books don't have to be boring. You don't need to, reading's not boring. It's exciting. It's fun. Yep. And I think if you show that's going to be something that fosters those feelings in kids.
We saw the Pooh Sticks. Do you remember, Teacup?
Yeah. A few years ago, there was a Winnie the Pooh exhibition at the Victoria and Albert Museum. Oh, and wow. So there was something for the kids and also something interesting for adults.
The grown-ups.
Most visitors when we were there were a bit older.
Yep.
And they did something via video. So they projected the river and the bridge onto the floor, and where you could do more or less the Pooh Sticks. So watch it. It was really lovely.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
That's so cute.
Yep. I think the children had a lot of fun, and so did we.
Yeah,
the grown-ups. It was fun. Oh, but I have to say they only had the T-shirts for the children.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Which I find most discriminating.
Yeah. We should have sued them.
Yes, definitely.
Ageist.
Yep.
So I could only get a bag in the picture.
Yeah.
But no
yeah,
t-shirt.
yeah. It's always the same. I mean, for us adults, the cute ones are always for the children. I want them too. Excuse me. They're fun. And would you say that children could read, I mean, books written for them, also that they could read all kinds of genres? Or would you say there is a genre not suitable? I mean, except for romance, of course.
I think
but
and horrors, maybe not.
why not? I mean,
scary, but not horror.
yeah, scary, but not horror.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it also depends on the kid. I remember one of my good friends in middle school, her name was Anne. She was reading, her maturity level was way above me. She was just a very smart, very intelligent girl. And she was reading books that, were like this big and we're in the second grade. And I'm like, my eyes are bugging out and I don't understand how she's doing this. But she also had, I think that depends on the grown up and the relationship with your kid. Her mother was a pharmacist and they would be able to discuss things. So probably if she read something that was scary or too much, you could go get a calm description of it or an explanation of it from an adult. And I think that's been one of the things that as an aunt and as we're, after having worked with some kids on occasion, being honest and not immediately becoming inflammatory or freaking out when a kid approaches you with something that they're scared by or something that maybe was not quite age appropriate, and just giving them a staid explanation of the item is normally best. But I mean, obviously with things like horror, and if it's a 7-year-old who scares easily, probably not. If it's a little kid like my nephew who wants things to be scarier, spice it up a little bit. But I mean, I'm not gonna go bring him to see like a Saw movie or something. But
she couldn't watch that either, so
I don't want to.
You don't have to, but just saying.
Thank you.
Like I love horror. I'm also a horror fan, but I do think that there's stuff that I can't do, like body horror. It grosses me out too much. Can't do it. I actually read a great book called The Return. It was so good. It's an incredible. I think horror actually does an amazing job at being a great like sociological study. And when I think horror has become the new, at least in the sense of how I think about the great, like they always say, like the great American novel, as something that can like look through society or like hone in on a societal issue. The Return, Rachel Harrison, I believe is the author's name. I'm going to double check that real quick for you. I loved it. This was the first book in a long time. Yeah, Rachel Harrison was her name. But she really breaks down like female friendships, and it's in America, so maybe like culturally things will be different, but at least from my perspective, she did such a good job of breaking it down, making it realistic, talking about the amazing relationships that can come from it, while also having the insecurities that can form when you have a group of people who are friends rather than just a one-on-one connection. And then she also has body horror happening, which was gross, but so well done. Highly recommend that book. It's not like gratuitous body horror. She filters it in really well, but it's such a good book. I highly recommend it. But I think that with her book, she is breaking down interesting relationships and also class issues, and it was fascinating. Like I do think that horror, when it actually looks at a human issue, is potentially becomes one of the great like American novels.
You just mentioned class issues. I mean, don't get me wrong, and don't be offended if I ask that, but would you say, or correct me if I'm wrong, but we always, or sometimes, often, get the impression that America is the most class-conscious society in the world?
But we always feel that the Americans say they have no class system.
It's nebulous. It definitely, there is certainly a class system, but because of like clubs or, if you go to a public school, you can have a mesh there that makes it more intertwined, and there's definitely a class system in the sense of, wealth disparity for sure. But I honestly, like from an American perspective, I always thought that like, just from watching like Korean dramas, I thought that like Korea has a very strict like class system. I mean, this is just me watching the show. I haven't ever been to Korea or like done like a deep sociological like study on it, so I could be very wrong. But just from what I see from like the movie Parasite, that seemed, that was that, and then I'm watching Little Women right now, the show that they have out on Netflix, which is really fun. But I mean, I can definitely say that there's God, it's very hard to describe here because it's more understated. It's not like you shouldn't show your face here because you're poor, but you wouldn't even think about going to this place because you're poor. Like you wouldn't even go to this fancy club in, like the center of Philadelphia because you have absolutely no way of accessing it. And then if you went, you might stand out like a sore thumb, but maybe you won't. Not that anyone would turn you away or be like, you can't wear those shoes in here, but it's just sort of like the nausea of it. Like you would feel out of place walking in. That it's very, I would say, unconscious. I think that might be a better description. Like you unconsciously know that you're not supposed to be here, that kind of thing. Or like going to certain neighborhoods. Like I know, like we're like, we're probably like middle class. Like we're probably straight in the middle class. But there's neighborhoods here where if I walked in, I would be like staring at people's homes because you're just like, oh wow, I can't afford that. It's like I said, so it's not like no one's going to turn me away at the gate or anything, but I will know. It will be made clear I am under this class.
Yeah.
And those people might be perfectly lovely and, offer me inside and give me drinks and it'll be, fine, but you're very aware of where you are.
Do you think it would be somehow easier if there would be let's say like kind of an official class system where okay, you're part of this class and the other person's another class, and it would be easier to, I don't know, manage public life?
I don't think so, because I love being able to wander through different groups of people. Like one of the best and worst experiences I ever had was taking a train from Pennsylvania across the country to California. It was one of the best experiences I ever had because there were so many different walks of life on that train. And it was one of the worst experiences I ever had because the American train system is trash. But getting to meet, I think having opportunities, I think being able to meet people of different classes and actually engage with other people makes society better, in my opinion. I think it's more helpful. And like my husband, he had been in the Marines for several years. He had people from all walks of life, all different religions, different colors, different classes. And he said it was probably for his younger Marines who were just joined out of high school and who maybe had never left their hometown, or for people who were doing it just because it was a job. He said, I think on the maturity and like a societal level, it was very, very good for them because they were forced to interact with people who didn't think like them or didn't look like them. So personally, I think having more opportunities for people to meld together, whether it goes well or it gets a little messy, I think, because I knew I grew up in a very small town that did not have a lot of people of color at all, because it was just based on like back over a few hundred years, not a few hundred, over 100 years ago. There had been a lot of like Mennonites who had lived there, and it was a very, very just tiny little farming community. So when I got to go out to the wider world of, a suburb of Philadelphia, it was like, woo, it's cosmopolitan. It was huge for me. My education shot up. I got to meet people and just learn new things. I think you're right in the sense of like, it's also just nice to know where you stand and how the lay of the land is, which is always good. But I think being uncomfortable and having to mind meld with other people, I think as in like the long-term effects, I think it can be a lot better.
Yeah. I'm also wondering now, of course, again, back to the books for me, because as an indie author, you have more or less all the freedom you want, writing whatever you want. So would you like to dip your toe into books for adults? And if so, which genre would it be then?
I actually have 2 manuscripts that I've been working on for a while. One is, I guess it could technically be young adult, but I don't really want it to be young adult. I think it's just going to be a dark fantasy novel that has been completely plotted out, and most of it is written, but I have to finish it. And then I was also working on a horror novel. Yeah, so I like a lot. I'm a very eclectic reader, and I am determined to be an eclectic writer. So when the adult books actually come out, I'm thinking on my website that I'm going to have to label a section that's like, for the adults, kids don't go here yet. Like, wait for your birthday, then you can check it out. But I also have a plan for another poetry book that's sort of cooking at the moment. So we'll see how that goes. Basically, the pandemic made me realize that there's no point in waiting to do the stuff you want to do. So do the stuff you want to do, wear the ridiculous clothes. My wardrobe got very crazy during the pandemic. I was just like going through, there's this app called Vinted that I love. And it's just, like people will sell their clothes online. So I'm getting like buying wigs, I'm buying all kinds of crazy outfits. And my husband is like, what? It's happening. I was like, don't worry about it. It's great. It's fine.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. It's been a good time. So basically just I have a good time being ridiculous, and I'm determined not to pigeonhole myself. Yeah. So when I have time to write, I'm going to write what I want, and then I'm going to try and do it well. That's another thing. I'm trying to make sure that I don't just rush things. I want to actually make it polished and nice and make it something worth reading.
Yeah. Would you say that as an indie author, it's easier then to not get pigeonholed?
Yeah, I think so. In that regard, I do think it's nice to be an indie author. And I'm very fortunate because I'm part of an indie collective, Indies United Publishing, which has been incredible. We all pitch in, we all help advertise with each other's books. Like on my website, I have an In the Spotlight section where I highlight different books from the authors in the co-op. They do the same. Lisa Orban, who has been organizing all of this, is an angel. I don't know how she keeps us all on track, or like she's incredible. But this says, I was so happy that I found them, and I submitted Egg-Shaped Ball to them, because you have to submit to be accepted, and they liked it, which I was very grateful for. And that's how I got started with them. So it's tough. I mean, it is tough to be an indie author, but that freedom to do what you want when you want to do it is so nice. Because I know most of us all have day jobs. Like we all have something else that we're doing. So it's tough. I mean, and life is just busy no matter what's going on. Like it's just hard sometimes. But yeah, in that regard, in terms of being able to do what you want to do, that's being an indie author is great for that.
And also the question is for the indie authors, what about events? Do you have events from your, indie publishing house, or are you thinking of organizing something, a meet and greet or something like that?
Yeah, so I've actually done, I'm organizing, I've done a book reading for Death at Dusk Bar in my hometown, and I'm doing another one actually on the 22nd at a really lovely little thrift store boutique in Downingtown, Pennsylvania, just fun. So I'm doing that, but I know that some of the other authors in the collective have wanted to get together and do maybe organize a festival on our own. It's just kind of tough because we're all over the country. Thankfully, though, I do have some people who are on the East Coast with me who are only maybe 2 hours away or so. So I think we're going to try and organize something. I know that we've talked about it before, which would be awesome. But with events, I like to talk to people. Obviously, I haven't shut up yet. So
good for you.
Think those are really fun. I like doing book readings and engaging with people and talking. So I've gone to a library and talked. There was actually a really cute little kids writing club at a library, and I went and spoke with them, and we talked about publishing and writing, and that was great. That was a great way to get the name out there about the book. And then doing another book reading, I think, has been good as well. But you also have to, that can be good in the sense of that you will find someone who has a store and you won't have to pay a fee to use it, but you've got to get people to the events. And there's a lot of hard work that comes in that's not writing. Which I think indie authors, maybe all authors, aren't prepared for. So I made little postcards for my book with reviews on them, and I just mailed them out to wherever neighborhoods are going to be near this book reading. But that's a lot of you gotta write these postcards. But it also costs money, so you need to be prepared for that. And I don't think so it's tough. It can be very, very tough. I remember thinking, oh my God, it's more time consuming to market these books than it is to write this book. So that's something that time management is key.
Yeah. And would you say that, I mean, you are not on any social media platform as far as I've discovered, but I mean, social media for authors, it's the thing probably, but at the same time not, because we had an author on our show.
It takes a lot of time.
Yeah, who just closed down all his media presence on social media, and he doesn't do any more social media.
Yeah, but he was on it before it, so he had his audience and his readers.
He was known because of social media, so it was easier for him to say, not anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I got rid of it during the pandemic because it was making my brain explode. And I also realized I was wasting so much time on it that I wasn't writing. Yeah. So for me, I have my website, and I know that social media is an incredible tool, but I also found that when I was trying to actively market and engage with people on any platform, it just turned into an echo chamber of authors talking to authors, because we were all trying to do the same thing, and we just kept getting stuck of being like, look at my book, look at my book, look at my book. So I found that it has honestly been better for me to just have my website, engage with book reviewers, reach out to people, like physically reach out to them, in the sense of maybe like writing them a personal email, or, you know, commenting on their websites, subscribing to their videos, or, I know that if someone else tags me on social media, like if I get a mom who's very excited about the book and she posts about it, she has people who are readers that like her friends will want it. Yeah. Like I'm depending on other people's social network to market for me if I'm good enough that someone takes a picture of my book, you know. But I've also found that face-to-face interaction is way more successful in selling books. I've had way more success way more like instant success with lower effort. If I go out, talk about my book, and then people will buy it. You have a relationship, you have that face-to-face interaction. Also, instead of just like liking bookstores on social media, I will contact them and ask them to buy my book. And that's been successful. People will, you'll get a handful of them and will say, yes, sure. But that's more sales than I would have had posting it on Instagram and just hoping that someone sees it. So I think doing more direct action has been better. Social media is great. I think it's done amazing things for poetry, and which is another point. I was like, I need to reach out to Francis was his name?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I honestly really want to reach out to Francis, because it was so fascinating listening to that interview, especially when he was talking about the school shooter drills. And it was funny because I could hear his brain click when he had been talking about how like he wants his poetry to make people feel things and have that sort of universal connection. But then there was the disconnect of like your culture and American culture, and you don't have that, but you still felt something, But he was like, oh wait, you guys, like it was interesting when you have to think outside, because he was writing for an American audience, which is fine, but it was just amusing to see like, oh yeah, like you can still get a very intense reaction from someone else, but it was good because he was able to tell you guys about what his life is like in the US. It was just like really funny to hear his brain go click into gear, and he's like, oh yeah.
Yeah, it was not just the shootings. I think also when he mentioned the traffic stops.
Yes, yes, that was interesting too.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, my stomach drops. Well, I remember when I was a teenager, my stomach would drop mainly because I was like, oh God, my parents are going to see this. It wasn't really the cop. It was more like, oh dear God, my parents are going to find out.
There's nothing we worry about here either, I'd say.
The funny thing is sometimes things and situations seem very similar.
Yeah.
But people from different backgrounds, different countries, interpret it in a different way because it's seen differently in different countries. Yeah,
because like you said, I mean, when I read this poem, and I thought, oh God, those poor children. I mean, doing these kind of drills. I mean, this is so mind-boggling.
Yes, and it is as Kafka-esque as he was describing when he said that they were watching videos of kids throwing apples. One of my brother-in-laws is a teacher, and one year they were considering giving the teachers buckets of rocks. And I was like, who did you pay? Who did you pay to give you this idea? This was a terrible idea. Who scammed you? Like, I think it is very Kafka. It's just...
Yeah,
So it's ridiculous and it's crazy and it's insane, and we are all basically just living in Kafka's world right now over here on this end of the pond. Like
it's always a bit surprising.
Yeah, but over here things happening.
They're
you
also
can only
surprising.
wonder too.
Yeah. You can't think that. You can't imagine that. I mean, if you would put it in a book, everyone would say, "Oh, come on,
it's crazy.
It's not possible.
Yeah, like, this is ridiculous.
What are you writing? This is completely."
Yeah, but really, you're just reading the papers. So.
Yeah, just open. The paper.
I mean, we've had conversations with friends. One of us said something about, "Oh, that sounds like a dystopian heart," And I'm like, wait, that happened. Like, we are living in a dystopia. Like, this is what, and it's not all like, this is one of the reasons why I had to get off social media. I was like, obviously there's a lot of bad going on here in the US, but I realized that one thing that made it worse was like, I've been talking about echo chambers. All of the bad is so magnified that you do, like, I would be like feel physically ill like almost every other day because I was like, oh my God, the world is falling apart, it's imploding. And then when I got out of that space, it was so much easier to be like, okay, I'm not going to stick my head in the sand, but getting news from my local paper and figuring out what I can do in this space with my tools for my local community and try and have a ripple effect it's been better for me. Yeah. I've been more productive and I've been more willing to actually engage with my community. And I think that at least for me, having the image of like, okay, obviously there's a lot going out beyond my control. There are things happening on the national level that are worrisome. I can't really do anything at the moment about that, but I will focus on what I can do, and we will try and hope that it builds a bigger effect as time goes on. Yeah.
But I have to say, dear listeners, I highly recommend just watching cat videos and cat pictures on social media. It's way better.
I mean, it's uplifting, but also very time-consuming.
Yeah, but stick to the uplifting part then.
Yeah.
But that and newscaster bloopers. Definitely recommend those on bad days.
But regarding your books, I also think that if you're one post among hundreds others, it might not be really recognizable, remembered. Otherwise, if you talk to a person, you stand out. And they will remember that, and so it has more effect.
Absolutely,
that's what I found, and like I said, I just enjoyed that more. I like actually having events because you've made something special. Maybe they won't buy your book, but they had a good time. It was the first book reading that I did for my fantasy book for the kids, and this family came. It was a grandmother, her daughter, and her 2 grandkids, and she ended up telling me about this children's story that she was working on called Grandma's Hat, where she's baking pancakes for her kid, and she flips up a pancake and it falls on her head, and it's like really cute. It's really cute. So I hope, or Grandma's Beret, I believe it's called. If it's out, I hope that she has had a lot of success with it. But that was really fun. And I was like, I got to meet you because of this. I wouldn't have had this connection, which is what I was saying about the train. That was there are so many people I wouldn't have met. And I actually wrote a good chunk of the 3rd book on that train. And I made the poor girl sitting next to me listen to it. She told me that she had been a nanny, and I was like, amazing. Listen to this children's book.
Who knows what might come out of it? I mean, like you said, meeting people is interesting. I mean, even if it's not in person, then like you said, via Zoom or any other way to connect in person. Yeah.
Or just sitting somewhere and watching people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, events which are online. I mean, it was one of the plus sides of the pandemic, doing things this way.
Yeah, and I do think, and I don't think that social media is, I mean, Zoom isn't really social media, obviously, but I think that for me, I also try to have one of my catchphrases is everything in moderation, right? So like doing stuff via Zoom and being able to connect with people that physically would not have happened. Yeah. Like, this is awesome. I'm having a great time talking to you both. And this wouldn't have happened without this technology. Yep. So I do think that that's incredible with what we've been able to do with it. And like the David Tennant show Staged, where they were filming that over Zoom. It was him and Michael Sheen, and they were doing like a Zoom production. Yep. It was really fun. Like, a lot of creativity came out of it. And I mean, this book was born during the pandemic. So I think a lot of good came from the creative wise of like, you're stuck in this box. How do you make it a fun box?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's still good to forge relationships with people.
Yep. Absolutely.
Any way you can.
Yep. And what would be your advice for any other independent author out there? What should they do? What, be it a writing process, be it marketing, any advice you can give?
I think the most practical advice that I can give is set a schedule. Set a time for yourself to write, whether it be for 30 minutes or an hour. And then also make sure that you have, I set up a separate little like bank account. So if there's anything that I had to spend on the book, it would come from there, because you will, it is costly to market your book. Even if you are trying to save, if you're doing everything on a cost-effective measure, you will probably spend more money. You will spend more money initially than you make in sales. And I think because even like with my co-op, we all chip in, but we have to we pay dues. So you need to be prepared for that. I think that was one of the bigger shocks. Like obviously I had to pay my illustrator. You need to pay for formatting the book. It's either you pay people who know what they're doing or you learn how to do it yourself. And that can be, if you don't know, I was banging my face against a wall for like hours before I contacted Lisa and I was like, please put the book together. Like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
So that's another thing too. Trust people who know what they're doing. Get good referrals. Get an editor. An editor is going to be your best friend. Do not fear the red ink. The red ink is good. So time management, budget yourself, get an editor. Those are the top three things.
So in some way, you say you have to regard it, apart from the creativity part, you have to regard it as a business. And that's why you have to set your goals and you have to invest in the beginning.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think you need to be, the romanticism of saying I'm an author is great, but you have to work for it. It's work. You can't just, you might have the 1 in a million success of like throwing a poem up on social media and having it become amazing, but like we can't all do that. And like you need to work. I think because there's plenty of successful authors out there who probably aren't super famous, but have done enough work where people are buying their books. There's still books in the grocery stores, like someone's buying them. So you just need to actually treat it as, you don't have to go into super dystopian capitalism. It's a product. You got to push, but you do need to work. You are working on a craft and you need to actually give that craft the respect it deserves.
Yeah, sage advice, I'd say. Mm-hmm. And what other plans can we look forward to? Your book 2 in your Antyfas universe is out on the 19th of October. And what else is there to come in the near future?
Yes. We are well into the third book following that, which features the cousin of Cristiano and Alessio, one of the cousins, I should say. Her name is Emily. And her story begins with a dragon accidentally burning down her schoolhouse. That book is going to be called Fraud's Forewarning. And it's going to be Alessio's book is, like I said, danger and thrills. Emily's book is going to have some danger as well. It's going to focus on making tough decisions and learning to face your fears head on. So we're going to see how that goes. Okay. As of right now, we've already got some grown-ups being caricatured in there. I think I got Emily and her sister down pretty well. Her sister, Samantha, also makes an appearance in the book, being a rather torturous big sister. It's very funny. The girls are hysterical. So we have a good time. We'll have to see if volleyball makes an appearance in that one, but we'll see. We'll figure that one out as we go along.
Okay. Quite a few things to look forward to then.
Maybe some adult novels in the
making.
Future.
Maybe as soon as next year.
I hope so.
We keep our fingers crossed for that. Teacup?
Yeah,
definitely. Cool. Absolutely. So, Laura, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure talking to you.
It was.
It was wonderful. Thank you so much.
You did enjoy this episode as much as we did? Then hit subscribe and don't miss the next episode. Also, make sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. If you like to support us and buy us a coffee, you can do so via Buy Me a Coffee and other platforms. You can find all the necessary links in the description. Until next time.